All right, we're ready to dive into the feeding of the 5,000. Welcome to 10-Minute Bible Study, wherein we are studying the Gospel of John in 10-minute, easily digestible bites 5 times a week. John 6, 1-3. After this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. And a very large crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. After a rather intense discourse with the Pharisees, and also, apparently, a lot of time with the crowds, Jesus decided to find a little place of rest for his disciples in the wilderness area on the northeast shore of the Sea of Galilee. Our word for sea usually denotes a saltwater sort of situation. We do not, for instance, speak of Superior as a sea. We speak of it as a lake. We call it a great lake rather than a sea because it's fresh water. For us, a sea means salt water, but it's not the same in Greek. A sea can be a large body of water, fresh or salty. And in Galilee, it was a freshwater lake, which was about half the size of Lake Mille Lacs that we have in Minnesota, but it was much deeper than Lake Mille Lacs. It had a maximum depth of about 140 feet. And as you can see, it's bordered by mountains, causing those famous storms that scriptures talk about that the disciples would often find themselves caught in. It is the second lowest freshwater lake in the world. It is spring-fed, and it is the source, the main source, of the Jordan River, which flows south from it. The Romans, like most conquering nations, wanted to change the name of it, and they called it the Lake Tiberias. It didn't stick too well with the people that were there at the time. They did that in 20 A.D., and everybody was still calling it the Sea of Galilee at the time of John's writing. Two important verbs occur in verse 2 that gives us a flavor of the situation that English cannot give. When I look at it in the original Greek, it has two imperfect verbs. An imperfect verb is one that has activity starting in the past, but it doesn't finish. It just keeps on going. So therefore, it's imperfect. It doesn't quit. And so here's a clunky literal translation that I'm putting up there that will communicate the force of these imperfect verbs and give you an understanding of the crowds a little bit better. And a large crowd kept on following him because they continually saw the signs that Jesus was doing for the sick. It would seem that Jesus was continuously or habitually healing people as he went. And the miracles were doing what they were meant to do. They were meant to tell people that this was the Messiah, to alert people to who Jesus was. They were meant to show that he was the Messiah, and of course, that meant that Jesus and his disciples were not going to be able to get the rest that they were looking for. Imagine sitting on a high pasture with a lake below. That's what they were looking for. A spot like this, a place to sit down and rest, far away from civilization. But soon, 5,000 people show up. Think Woodstock, minus the loud electric guitars, minus the hippies, minus the nakedness, minus the general squalor. On second thought, don't think about Woodstock. Forget about it. Sorry to put that in your mind. Think instead of a secluded space on a mountain with gorgeous views and with access to Jesus, being able to hear and see him. Now, we don't know what mountain it was that they were on. John tells us just the mountain. Some have surmised that when he wrote it, the people who read it would understand what he meant by the mountain, but we don't. That's been lost in history. I'm sure many a Holy Land tour would love to know the exact place, and then they could make hay out of that, I suppose. But suffice to say, it was probably a pretty scenic and cool place where Jesus and his disciples sat down. John 6, verses 4 to 7. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. Lifting up his eyes then, and seeing that a large crowd was coming towards him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. And Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough to feed each of them to get a little. Jesus was kind of sly, I think, asking Philip this question. Jesus had knowledge enough of where to get food, and not only that, he knew what he was going to do, that he was going to do this miracle. But he wants to see if Philip will anticipate or have the faith to see or even think that Jesus would do this. And Philip was from Bethsaida, which was nearby, and he would be the expert in the region and would know where to buy food if they needed. But Philip, the expert, confined his thinking to the things of this world, and he really offers no solution. He says 200 denarii would not be enough to feed even a little, give each person a little taste. Philip didn't want to be that guy who says to the crowd, "All right, line up for food, everybody. Everybody gets a crouton. Enjoy." He didn't want to be that guy. And so he says, "We don't have enough money." And he merely makes the situation more hopeless. That's all he could do. He said, "Buy? It's hopeless. We don't have the money." A denarius is a day's wage, and 200 days' wages was not enough to feed 5,000 people. Philip did not pass the test. He's spent days and days watching Jesus do miracle after miracle. I think that he was also there to see him make water into wine. So he'd seen Jesus make something out of nothing before, and yet Philip could not imagine that Jesus had any solution for this. He was earthbound in his thinking. And so was Andrew. John 6, verses 8 to 9. One of the disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are they for so many?" These guys were doing what every human being does when we find ourselves in a tough situation. We're careful, take a careful accounting of what our resources are, what we have, and we make plans and begin to fret when we realize that we don't have enough. I suppose that's why Jesus taught us to pray, "Our Father who art in heaven," and then to pray furthermore, "Give us this day our daily bread." This petition is directed at the Father, and through it reveals the truth that our daily bread, that everything we need to survive, is given to us by the Father. And the problem is we don't always believe that. And Philip didn't even think about it. All he thought about is how his money buys his bread, and that's the way we think too. And so we overly fixate on our bank accounts. We get really super fascinated by our investments. We spend a lot of time thinking about these because we imagine that these are the things that take care of us. This is the stuff that what misers are made out of. This is the stuff that leads to family feuds. Not Family Feud with Richard Dawson, but actual family feuds over money. Because we believe that money, whoever has the most money, is the one who is going to be the most secure in life. Yeah, sure, tell that to the rich fool, though, who had many, many barns full to the brim, and yet he died. The next line in this text is absolutely beautiful. Jesus allowed Andrew and Philip to openly consternate over their situation for a while, and then he says these words, "Have the people sit down." This is going to be good.